So here's what we're looking to accomplish with this next little bit, guys. EC is going to teach me the snatch and the progression that she uses for a large group.
We know that this can be a little bit complicated to teach and there's a lot of steps. So this is my approach to it. I'm also, like Chris said, want to point out some things that I'm looking for across the whole group and all of that stuff. Those 10 components of fitness we talk about, a lot of those, coordination, accuracy, agility, balance, power, speed are all found in the mechanics of the snatch. And so I try to do a little bit of sales on this, that working the time on this movement will transfer to everything else that you do with CrossFit, and I do believe that the clean and the jerk are relatively easy after the snatch. So try to get some buy-in there of why you might want to look at this movement. And then I actually start with the athletes with the push press, because in the snatch, that most powerful down and the up, the speed through the middle that Coach B talks about, really is similar to that dip drive of the push press. And so I actually have my athlete feet underneath the hips, bar up in the push press rack position, and then I have them dip and hold. And I just stress that we want those shoulders stacked over hips, that he's nice and perfectly vertical. And while they're holding that dip position, I actually have them lower the barbell to the front side of the body and widen their hands until that bar falls kind of in their crease their hips. And for most people, that's a great width to start for snatching. Then I'll have them go ahead and stand. And we'd like to test that grip, right? Because not every person can dislocate there. And so that's when I'll have the group go ahead and do some dislocates. If we have that funky dance to get the bar over, just have them widen their grip. That actually brings up a question that we get a lot with people about grip width. If it's a light load, if it's a PVC load, I let them go as wide as they can so that they can get in the overhead position and bail. Keep in mind, however, that like Coach Bergner is always going to recommend, typically for beginners, a really narrow grip, because having your wrists at a really extreme angle with load is too much. You have to kind of build up the strength incrementally. So a lot of times you get that question like, well, what about my wrists hurt and all that stuff? If you're starting a new beginner, it's great to have them work at a light load and gradually go out, even though they might not be able to dislocate here. Just choose a weight that's safe. So understand that sometimes there's that conflicting information. So anyway, they've got this grip, they tested it, and then so with the barbell back on the front side of their body, I have them just dip and hold again. And I'm really stressing that I want this the shoulders stacked over the hips the whole time, and then go ahead and stand. And kind of like the push press progression, I then have them dip drive slow, adding a little bit of speed without stopping at the bottom and stressing that they're not letting their chest come forward. Inevitably, most people do have just a little bit of this dropping of the chest over the bar, and I don't want them. I want them to really be feeling this nice vertical position, because that's the power on the way up of this movement. We want them to be hitting vertical when they're jumping up. And so I actually, at this point, once they go down and up a couple times, we'll have them turn to a partner next to them and use their PVC. Like if I was partners with Chris, do that whole like we've got a wall here where the butt and the lat touches, and they go down and up a couple times and feel that they're keeping that nice vertical torso. So I'll have Chris go 3 times and then the partner go 3 times, and they're kind of checking themselves. At this point, when the group's kind of working with themselves, I'm kind of just yelling cues loudly to try to keep some semblance going on, but inevitably you'll have people who think they're doing this correctly and they're like, sure Chris, go ahead. And they let all this separation happen. So you really have to be kind of strict on them and be like, you have to make connection. And as you know, since they're working with people they don't know, putting the PVC on the lat and the rear end, they might be a little awkward about that. So I'm like, make connection. I kind of make a big point about that, so they're really strict. So after that, I bring them back to the full group, and we're just doing the down and up again with some speed at this point, just like the push press progression. And so we do that a couple times where it's focusing on, again, the up. It's not so much that we need to drop fast, but we want them to rebound fast out of the bottom, because that's the power here. After that point, we add the shoulder shrug. So we're just going to dip shrug. And I'm stressing the whole time here, I don't want that chest falling forward at all. Just hammering home what it's going to feel like. We're in that hip extension position, we're in that finish position that you always hear Coach B talk about, to be really nice and vertical. A lot of people here are doing, the Kelly Starrett douchebag shoulder, or super tight here. Might have them just relax their arms a little bit and really just let the shoulders follow the action of the hips. And so you can really kind of just see that across the board. People are a little bit all tensed up. After the dip shrug, then we just add the high pull. And I typically will have them demonstrate where they're going with the high pull, just so they know that it's just coming to the sternum, and then release it. And then we'll have them do dip shrug, high pull, really focusing on that bar, kind of almost shaving the chest, keeping that bar path as close as possible. We good so far? So progression is dip, shrug, high pull. Then we just go to the muscle snatch, which there's no rebend in this. We're talking about the turnover of the third pull here. And so the bar just goes overhead, couple things I stress here. One, how is your overhead position? Is it really overhead? How's their midline? Inevitably, a lot of them have that, that hyperextended look going on. And then how are their armpits? We're looking for that armpits forward with some retraction as well as elevation, not just that terrible internal rotation. We see that a lot too. So I kind of hammer that for a couple reps, rest. And then the last thing I hammer after we kind of talk about overhead position, I'll have them do 2 more reps or 3 more reps or whatever, saying, hey, let's focus now when we turn over that it's not just this swing to overhead. You'll see people just sort of like get it up overhead. That's how people miss to the back a lot. So if they turn it over and they have to actively press up into the bar when you do this movement. And so we want them to keep that bar close and press up into it when they go. Yeah, so it's not just sort of swinging it back. And so I'll have them focus on that a little bit a couple times. So that's kind of like how the upper body is going to move. And at that point is when I start incorporating the receiving position a little bit more. So I warm them up in the receiving position as the overhead squat. So we just take them out to their shoulder width stance and I have them go down and up at their own pacing at this point. And this is where I stress that if they have the mechanics, go low as possible, right? Because we know that you don't just want to get hips below knees when you're O-lifting. If you can, you really want to get ass to ankle. So I had them feel that a couple times. This is probably about 7-8 minutes in at this point. And then rest. And what we're going to do is we're going to combine the down and the up with the receiving position, so their feet come back underneath their hips, and I have them just jump and land an overhead squat or a snatch from the high hang. So if you want to jump and land an overhead squat, go ahead. And stand. And so a couple things that obviously can be going on here. One, we're going to have people who are still dropping their chest forward. 2, we're going to have people who aren't opening their hips because they're dropping their chest forward. And we're going to have bad bar path. We're also going to have early pulls. All of the stuff that you guys see in all your other movements. What I do at this point, after they've done 1 or 2 reps as that large group, I go back to their partner. And I have them, if I was partners with Chris, I become the wall on the front side of the body. And I think this helps teach the athlete who's working body positioning and bar path. If he dips forward, he's going to run into me. No good. If he swings the bar out, does that sort of deltoid raise, the bar is going to be coming into me. No good. So I really make them work and have the stick make contact on the end. Chris would jump and land an overhead squat 3 times. Then I go, or however many reps you want to do, but a couple so that they feel it. And actually let them go back and forth a couple times, just because this movement's a little bit like you get stuck in your head a little bit. So let them do a few reps, I go a few reps, then we do that again. And just so they have that. Inevitably, everyone says, sure, Chris, go ahead. And it doesn't help. So when this is going on, and this is the pandemonium, that's when I'm like, guys gotta be strict, get them, make them work. Because if you really have this connection here, it does keep that person really nice and vertical.
Do you address any arm bend at this stage?
I do if I see it. Inevitably people are, but I sometimes feel that if you get them to sort of relax and really do that kind of like shake out the shoulders and stress the hips, the arms do follow a little better. It's when you have that whole group like, I'm ready to snatch, then you'll have this happen a lot, you know what I mean? So I try to hammer that from the beginning when we're dip shrugging, keep this loose and just let the action follow. But yeah, you will see that, just like you'll see it in the sumo.
You see, every time I do the bar in front, so they jump straight up, inevitably, and I was wondering if anybody else has a cue for this, they always jump backwards.
Yeah.
They always jump back. Do you have a fix for that?
Yeah, jumping backwards not the end of the world. Now, if they're going crazy back, we don't want to have that, but right. Jumping backwards is not going to be necessarily a failed lift.
Okay.
So, as long as they're not excessively jumping backwards, in that case, I would try to say just jump up, but okay. I don't know, does anyone else have a better fix for that? But yeah, jumping slightly backwards is not disastrous. Okay. It's jumping forward that you really want to kind of nip in the bud.
Or Jeff, even put them on a line. If you find a seam on the floor, hit a seam and see if they can find the seam again.
So after they do the partners, where it's 3 or 2, however many reps back and forth a couple times, I bring them back to the large group and we jump and land an overhead squat as a large group 2 or 3 times. At this point, it's probably about 12-14 minutes in. And so I kill a lot of time really focusing on this jump and land from this vertical position. And that's because I think that's kind of the heart of the lift. That's the speed through the middle. You have to feel what vertical is. You have to feel like you're jumping vertical, opening the hips, all of that. And that's why I spend so much time there. So after I have them jump and land an overhead squat again as a large group, just to keep feeling those mechanics, I'll say, all right, we got to actually start working our way down to the ground, because that's just the snatch from the high hang. And so we work our way down to the hang position. The hang position is kind of where all the acceleration starts for the second pull. It's not really where you jump from. I know a lot of you are experienced with these lifts and talked with Coach Bergner. You actually jump from what he calls pockets, but the acceleration really starts to pick up at the mid-thigh. And so when I'm teaching a snatch in 20 minutes, when I'm teaching a large group, I just start them to think about acceleration at the mid-thigh. Mid-thigh is at mid-thigh, all right? So it's really between the hip and the knee. And so I would actually put Speal about here. And what you want to be looking for here is that the front part of the shoulder is out over the bar. He's got his back nice and long, and the knees are going to be soft here. Some people really love this lockout. That's no good. And the other error that we see a lot is too squatty. They'll just inevitably kind of like really sit into it. We want them to feel that hamstring tug, with this nice lumbar curve, front part of the shoulder out over the bar. Is that clear? Do you want to turn sideways so they just see that?
Did you say like that's the initial movement of bringing the bar down in the deadlift?
I'm sorry?
Did you say that's the initial movement you make?
Yeah, exactly. And that's how I say it. I say it's like lowering a deadlift. Push your butt back, but we have them stop at mid-thigh. Besides that squatty error, the most other common one is they'll immediately go to the top of the knees. And the reason that I don't like to coach that there is we don't want the person really starting their acceleration at top of the knees. We want them to starting the acceleration at mid-thigh. So I want them to feel a little bit different position than a true deadlift. Does that make sense? Yep. So from here, I have the large group jump and land an overhead squat 3 times, but we just hammered vertical. You got to stay vertical, all that stuff. And so I make the point that we want you to pass through vertical before you change direction, all right? So we can't have them do that not hip opening frog snatch. We want them to jump up and then underneath the barbell. Does that make sense? And that's why I spend so much time on vertical, so hopefully they have that idea of restack the shoulders over the hips, open the hips, all of that stuff. Does that make sense? From this position, besides the frog snatch, you'll also just have people who are doing the kettlebell swing snatch, where they'll just sort of throw their hips forward. And if you see that a lot, like if you see, I see like 3 people kind of doing that, I'll be like, all right, on the next few reps, we're just thinking about hips going up, not forward. You will have some questions, be like, I've been told that you're supposed to, like fuck the bar when you snatch and all that stuff. Like, all right. I've not been so successful with that, but there are different styles of the lift, so I would be careful to be like, that's an incorrect style. I just say that I follow Coach Bergner's style, which is a vertical hip pattern. And so if they have a different coach who's saying that they're really successful lifters who do have a horizontal hip, I don't coach that. So that's how I sort of answer this is a different style. But I try to have them try it at least going vertical and opening the hips. Not much else you'll see there. Yeah, you'll still have some early pulls and all that stuff, but it's mainly just the hip extension, and that's why hopefully they can feel that vertical position again.